On July 13th, 2024, the entire world witnessed a miracle. At exactly 6:11 p.m. in Butler, Pennsylvania, a gunman's bullet came within millimeters of taking President Trump's life and forever altering American history. And while one of those bullets tragically did take the life of a faithful husband and father protecting his family, countless patriots across the nation remain forever grateful to God for sparing President Trump's life. And yet, in the days and weeks that followed, those officials entrusted with the investigation of the assassination attempt, let's just say they've hardly inspired confidence. Quite the opposite. Their stonewalling and lack of transparency, together with the legacy media's complete blackout of this historic event, have only raised more questions that President Trump, the nation, and most especially Corey Cupitori's family deserve to have answered. Well, joining me today is someone who's on the front lines of getting those answers, the one and only Jack Posobiec. Now, for most of you, Jack needs no introduction. You've seen him with Tucker, you've seen him with Steve Bannon. Jack is a former military intelligence analyst, and he's the host of Human Events Daily on Real America's Voice Network. And he's got a brand new book out, Bulletproof: The Truth About the Assassination Attempts on Donald Trump. And you can get your copy by clicking on the link below or by visiting orderbulletproof.com. Jack, welcome, man. It's an absolute honor to have you here on the channel.
Well, I appreciate being here, and it was great having you over on Human Events the other day. Very, very well received, and I think you and I have been sort of rowing in the same direction for quite some time now.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad I'm rowing in the direction you're rowing. That's very
Oh
good
yeah, yeah,
confirmation
yeah,
for
yeah.
me.
Some people go the other way. It don't work out too well for them.
Let him, let him. What I loved about this book, and I was telling you, I was reading it over the weekend, is how it brings together your fields of expertise. So your background in military intelligence and analyst, you're a political analyst, you're a cultural analyst, but most especially, Jack, you're a man of faith, and you're a man who's committed to truth, which is uniquely symbolized in the cover image of this book. Can you
Thank
can
you.
you share with us what inspired you to choose that particular
Yeah.
photo of Trump for your cover image?
Of course, and obviously with your book and so many others, it's the iconic photo of Trump with his fist raised up in the air, and it's just an incredible, indelible, and clearly will be an image that is just remembered throughout history. There's we all know that that is the image that will be remembered throughout history. You don't see something like that more than once or maybe
Right.
twice in a lifetime. But to me, as a Christian, as a believer, I actually found a little bit more meaning, I thought, in the image that came immediately prior to the image that we all know. And this was an image of Donald Trump, and we've seen Donald Trump do so many things. We've seen him go around the world. We've seen him walk into North Korea without a security aides or Secret Service. We've seen him going into all across Europe. We've seen him Iraq, Afghanistan. We saw him at a McDonald's yesterday. We've seen him
A
in
drive through.
every capacity. But there's one, even in a drive-through. This, but there's one sort of image of Donald Trump that we never saw, at least prior to that day, and that was an image of Donald Trump publicly before others and before the world on his knees
Wow.
with his hands clasped before him as if he was in prayer.
Yeah.
And look, Donald Trump is a lot of things, and we Donald Trump Jr. actually wrote the forward to the book. We're very honored to have him do so. And I was sort of joking around with him, talking about the cover, and I said, Don, your dad is, he's known for a lot of things, but I don't know that humility or being humble is kind of
That was the joke of the 2016 primary. Do
one
you
of
remember that?
mine. Yeah, yeah. When it comes to Donald Trump, his name's on more buildings than I think anyone
Yeah.
else in the
Yeah.
world, and it's the airplanes and the hats and everything. It's Trump, Trump, Trump everywhere. So it's what he's known for, and so, but there is a history, and in fact, the biblical history of God sometimes choosing the unlikeliest of individuals to raise up, and to give positions of great power, and then through that conversion, be able to perform extraordinary works.
Yeah.
And in ancient times, this was what you would see when God would select a king, or would anoint a king, as a matter of fact. And there was always one prerequisite, though, to all of this. There's always one prerequisite, and that prerequisite was to humble
Yeah.
themselves before God. And you see this again and again and again throughout the Bible. The Old Testament, David, Solomon; the New Testament, you see it with Saul and his conversion to Paul, et cetera, et cetera. It's always an act of humility, an act of penitence. And so, in that moment, and I haven't spoken to President Trump about this, and I don't know if he would ever really, explain it, and maybe even he doesn't completely understand it. But
Right.
I've
Right.
heard him,
Yeah.
he's certainly spoken about it many times. Though, is that he came out publicly and said it was God alone.
Yeah. That's
Those
right.
4 words, it was God alone. And so I believe it was that moment of prayer where God gave him his mission, gave him the lesson of humility, and then when it was accepted,
Yeah.
that's what gave Donald Trump the strength. That's where the strength came from. That was not his own personal strength. That was something
Yes.
else.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we've never seen it before. And I say this as a guy who was in the military. I wasn't in combat, but I was in the military. I'm not Tim Walz, by the way. I'm not going to do that. Um, but you've never seen someone in combat. And I've got friends who are Navy SEALs and Delta Force and JSOC and all the different, outfits, where they say, wait a minute, when bullets are flying, when there's snipers out, when you don't know if the threat has ended, you get down, you get low, and you hide and you turtle, and then you get to your cover. You get to cover, right? You go to your armored vehicle, whatever it might be. You don't you don't stand up
Wow.
and put your fist in the air. It's the craziest thing you could do. And yet that's what Donald Trump did in that moment. He rose to his feet even with the threat still imminent,
Wow.
threw his fist in the air as if to say, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And if you want to kill me, take your best shot.
Yeah.
And it was in that moment where I said, this clearly must be divine intervention.
Yeah.
And you mentioned 6:11 p.m. Well, 6:11 p.m. was the moment that the shots were fired. And in fact, we have as the opening of the book, and I posted this tweet pretty early on when it was all going on, because I was watching the footage over and over and over. And then I started looking at other things that were in the footage. And this is what you do as as an intel officer. You think, okay, well, what else do I see on the screen? And I've been able to do this with a number of other pieces of footage throughout the investigation and into the videos. But this one that caught my eye was the time is up in the corner, because when you watch live news, the time's usually there, 6:11. And it just occurred to me that Ephesians 6:11 happens
Mhm.
to be one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. And that
Yeah.
is the invocation that we start the book on. And I'm not there are some people who put a lot of stock and really go in, and they know all the numbers and all the, they go through the Bible and they can do all of it. I wouldn't say I could do any of that, but this one, man,
Yeah.
it just hit me
That's
like a ton of bricks, where I'm like, come on, come on, it's right there, it's right there. And then, and then what have we seen since then?
Yeah.
What have we
Yeah.
seen since then is the public invocation of
Yeah.
Christianity by Donald Trump in
Yeah.
ways that we've never seen before. And anyone who's followed this movement, or followed him, or just known him, I've had dinner with him. And, I actually, when we had dinner last year, that I had said grace with my wife, prior to the dinner, and and he sort of commented on it, and he said, "Oh, you did your prayer, you did your prayer for the
You
meal."
did
So
that little
I said,
prayer thing there. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, he did the little prayer. I think that is actually how he said it. He did your little prayer. And I said, I was like, oh, you got to, Mr. President, you got to. He
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, that's," he said, and he was just telling me about some other friends who do that he had, and some of his golf buddies. He mentioned that they'll do a little prayer before they go out golfing with him. I said, "Oh, they must pray a lot when they golf with you, Mr. President." And but you could tell where while he had respect for it, and I don't want to say this in a negative way, he had respect for it, but for him, it wasn't something that he had
Yeah,
totally
it wasn't
internalized.
something he did. Right, right.
Yeah, yeah, but he's very respectful, and he supported it. But since the shooting, I mean, this guy is on fire for the Lord.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
he invoked God in the very
that's
first
right.
post on Tweet Social. It was God alone, not language that we're used to hearing from Donald Trump.
That's for sure.
He had said at the RNC, he said, "I wasn't supposed to be here today." The crowd
Right.
starts chanting, "Yes, you were." I was in the room. He says, "No, but I was given the chance to be here
Yeah,
today."
yeah.
And there's been things that he said in private where he's talked about this in terms of legacy, and now he's been invoking. He did the Saint Michael prayer, Saint Michael the Archangel,
I
and
saw
just
that.
over and over and over this
And Mary.
public embrace. And happy birthday, Mary! The great happy birthday,
Exactly.
Mary, Jose
Unbelievable.
Guadalupe,
We never saw that before. That's
and just very, again, this public embrace of Christianity. At the same time, by the way, where politically speaking, Kamala Harris is doing like the exact opposite, where she's attacking Christianity, which is like, spirituality aside of it, when you're in, the political arena and you're
yeah,
trying to win an election and you're,
yeah.
going up into these swing states and you're like, well, I need the evangelical vote, I need the Protestant
Right.
vote, I need the Catholic vote. Like, you want to try to win those people over. You probably don't want to be, I don't know,
Yeah.
embarrassing those
Excommunicating
people,
people say
attacking those
Jesus is Lord,
people, and Jesus is Lord, and you're at the
Christ
wrong
is
rally,
King.
buddy. And
Yeah.
you got Gretchen Whitmer doing like the Dorito Eucharist.
Oh, it's
Oh,
a
TikTok
disaster.
trend. Like,
It's a
I
disaster.
haven't seen that one there, Gretch. So
Absolute
it
disaster. But I just loved how
me,
you saw
it's
that
real. And
moment.
then he went to the Al Smith dinner.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I love how you just saw that moment through the eyes of faith, and I think you saw that moment the way God saw that moment, and yeah, and then he rose, and then he literally rose
yeah,
up to a blue sky and with the hand up. Somebody commented the only thing that was missing from that picture is a bald eagle flying right
no,
right
right, right,
across at
right,
the same
exactly.
time.
And
You know,
it's just one of the, and having been there, so I was not there at the first Butler rally, but I did travel in the course of researching the book for doing site surveys and learning about the scenery and just getting a sense of the lay of the land. I traveled there, and then I went to the second rally, which he held, which again, plays the Ave Maria,
oh
and
yeah, yeah,
very, very Christian. It was a memorial in many ways for Corey Compatore. His family was sitting in the front row, just a couple seats away from me, with
wow,
Eric and Lara Trump, and it was obviously very heavy for that reason. And it's something where that field, I mean, you go there, and it's and President Trump has said this as well, that it's sort of become almost a just the site that people travel to from all around the
yeah,
country, and people are flying in from all over the world, because there is an understanding among believers that this was the site, and we can't understand it, and we're not
right,
supposed to understand it, but
right.
it's the site where a miracle was worked. And
We're
I said, so
a bona
I
fide
refer to it
miracle
as the
happening.
miracle field.
Yeah.
It's the miracle field.
The miracle field. Yeah, it's becoming a sacred space, no question. I also want to a huge shout out to you as well because you did something pretty amazing in this book. I've written over 20 books throughout my tenure here in my adult life, but I have never written two books back to back within weeks of each other. When I
Yeah,
was
I don't
doing
recommend it, by the way. I really
yeah, yeah. I don't know how you did it. I
worst
mean, because you're
worst
so
decision.
it, it's literally
Yeah,
like a woman
literally
having children, but Irish twins or something
Irish
like
twins.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
These are the Irish twins of the books. And first of all, full credit to my co-author Joshua Lysek,
yeah,
just an
Joshua.
incredible guy, and we've done some interviews. You please have him on and ask him about that from that perspective, because he's a prior ghostwriter, and in his ghostwriting profession, he's done over, I think he's up to 96 books
Yeah.
that he had
Wow,
written, but
wow.
now he's sort of coming from behind the curtain, and he wanted to do the book with me, so we did an anti-communism book. about the
Mhm.
real history of communism and how
Unhumans. Yep.
it can be defeated, called Unhumans,
Mm.
earlier this year, New York Times bestseller, very, very successful.
Very successful.
And then I think, trying to remember, I think about 2 weeks into the media run of that is when Butler happened. And we're
I
sitting
I
there going,
I looked it up. It came out, like, the 1st week of July. I mean,
yeah,
literally
it
days
was
before
July
J
1st.
Butler. Yeah, yeah.
And we said two things. First of all, we said, well, we predicted in Unhumans that political assassinations would be something that would occur if you were, in fact, in a what we called at the time an irregular communist revolution, which is what we find ourselves in, what we call
Right.
it. And then Joshua, who's I'm totally giving him the blame on this, he calls me up and says, "Hey, we should write a book about all this." And I said, "No, we're not going to do that. We're doing the other book right now. We're supposed to be focused on this. We have a plan to do this. That's what the publisher wants. Let's focus on this. Maybe we'll write a book on it in a year or something like that, but right now we're going to focus on this." And then my publisher calls me up and says, "Hey, you guys should write a book on this." I'm like, "Man."
How many
So
voices do you need to
and I and I
hear?
and just given the content though, and the fact that everyone was talking about it and everyone was talking about the how could such a thing as this has happened? How is it even possible? How is there any way so many failures? And I
Yeah.
think the answer is quite simple. And the answer it's similar to the answer that we talked about in Unhumans. And I'll explain that very quickly and how I got to this. So in Unhumans, we say they'll say that the essential question, I think I hear for this from conservatives or just non-communists all the time. They would say, how can you support communism when communism has killed so many people, 100 million people? It's complete failure. It's ruined economies. How could you ever possibly support such an ideology? And I would argue that they don't think that killing 100 million people and
Mm.
destroying all those economies was a bad thing.
Right.
They think it's a good start. So, from their perspective, those people were anti revolutionaries and those people were status quoers and right wing
Mhm.
reactionaries and
Mhm.
conspiracy theorists and misinformation, disinformation agents. You get where I'm going with that. And so they needed to be removed from society so that the revolution and the utopia could eventually be achieved. Okay. So you have to flip it around on its head because that's
Right.
what communists actually do.
Right.
So then when people said, well, how could there be such failures? How could there be such, such mistakes, such lapses? And I say, what makes you think they're failures?
Wow. Wow.
So again,
Wow.
flip it around.
Right. Flip it
If
around.
you assume that the goal was to secure President Trump that day, then yes, they would indeed be failures. But if somewhere along the line the goal was in fact to unsecure President Trump, then it was a resounding success.
Wow.
And from that perspective, we go through and we walk through what we define as 12 independent security failures. That's just on Butler. We also were able to, as you mentioned, the writing process, we were able to get preliminary information on the second attempt as well, which happened in September.
September
And
15th. Yeah.
we go through all of this and basically lay out to say that there's no way that these were failures. And even in subsequent reporting that's come out since we completed this book, where Congress, it just came out a couple of days ago
Yeah.
and
Saw that.
at the end of last week, and said that the site lead agent was a female agent who only had 4 years out of FLETC. So that's the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center down in Brunswick, Georgia. FLETC is where it's sort of like NCIS, and it's sort of like Quantico for all the other secret special agents in government, so the 1811s. And so your Secret Service would go there, your OSI types for the Air
Mhm.
Force, your NCIS in the Navy goes through there. I almost went there at one point in my career, but I decided I'd do this instead. And
Yeah,
but
that's
yeah,
right. You don't get in as much trouble in this one, right?
jury's out as to whether or not that was a good idea or not. But it's funny because I actually do still know some people that are in the federal law enforcement. I said, "Hey guys, I have a tip for you. Maybe the next time when you're running a presidential event,
Yeah.
you could share the frequencies with all of the agencies that are working. Just a little tip that I could pass along to you." And of course, it was sort of laughed at. But the real serious nature here is that why was it that someone who had so little experience was given
Right.
the lead investigatory and protection duty of an outdoor rally for a guy who is arguably the most targeted
Yeah.
individual on the face of the planet? And going to an outdoor rally, as everyone knows, since Dealey Plaza of 1963 and
Right.
JFK,
Right.
that of course an outdoor political event is inherently the
Yeah.
most risky and
Yeah.
potentially
Yeah.
fatal event that you could ever do.
I
It's ludicrous.
I love you took a third way in this book, which I really appreciated because I noticed
We did.
right after the vote, right after the, vote, we all know what we're thinking about these last 2 weeks here. Right after the, assassination attempt, there were basically 2 assessments. Either this was apocalyptic incompetence, as I heard one person put it, on the part of the Secret Service, or more disturbingly, this involved actual complicity. Your book took a third way, which I really like. You called it it's something akin to intentional neglect. Can you
Intentional
can
neglect.
yeah, can you develop that a bit?
Sure. So, an intentional neglect is this idea, and this was actually borne out in the House report in a way that I didn't have. Well, I certainly spoke to House members, and we've interviewed them on my show leading up to this, so it doesn't surprise me that we'd come to the same conclusion. And intentional neglect is essentially this situation where he's deprived of, and we know he's deprived of full site security. He's deprived of his requests for extra security being granted. He's deprived of counter snipers. By the way, only until just a few hours before the event begins in Butler. Again, an outdoor rally with a
Yeah.
former president who's
Mm.
currently running for president again. And just it is this systemic denial of requests and not taking things seriously that stems from clearly a decision made at the highest level. And whether or not the Secret Service, the head of the Secret Service that under the Bush administration, the second Bush administration, was placed under the DHS. So
Mm.
that's Secretary Mayorkas. That's Alejandro Mayorkas was actually in charge of all of this. And
Yeah.
so everything you see in terms of resource distribution that day, where 13 um, Secret Service augments were given to Dr. Jill Biden, who had an event in the same AOR that evening, the Pittsburgh area where I was yesterday, that by the way, she was given 13 Secret Service augments for an indoor event at a restaurant, a very small private event, whereas he was only given 3 for a massive outdoor rally. And the
Unbelievable.
3 that he was given, again, as we've discussed, not the most trained, not the most experienced, essentially the B team. And so what we then did after that was, well, 2 things we did. First was we took all of the what we define as 12 independent security failures, and we plugged them all into a probability matrix. And we took that probability matrix and we said, what are the chances of all of these things happening, 12 independent security failures on the same day, that a trained marksman with intent to kill would show up at a Trump rally and with malicious intent? And we plugged all that into OpenAI, so GPT-4 Omni. And the answer we got back was that the odds were 1 in 1 septillion, which
Yeah.
is the same odds as flipping a coin 93 times and it always coming up heads. Now, if you or I did that at the casino, we'd probably be arrested because
That's
obviously
right.
cheating, right? And so, or clearly, you're like at a magician and they've got a trick coin or something, right? And then this is very interesting. I'll read this verbatim because I want to
While
get.
you're doing that for people that you explained it in the book, septillion, it's a new number I learned, 27 zeros. 1
27
in
zeros, yeah.
yeah, that's insane. In
So
other
we went.
words, it was intentional. That was your basic argument. Yeah,
Well,
please go
so
ahead.
before I say that, I'll tell you what GPT-4 Omni said, because we asked AI. We said, "What is your assessment based on all of this?" This is what GPT-4 Omni says. This is what the computer said. This probability suggests that the occurrence of all these failures and the presence of the shooter is extraordinarily unlikely by chance alone, raising serious questions about whether these events were truly random. So there you go. That's the computer
Wow.
said. I didn't say that. You didn't say that.
Right.
Joshua didn't say that. The computer said that. That even a computer, which is, GPT-4 Omni is typically designed to be, I think a little bit more liberal too, by the
Right,
way.
right, exactly.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but given a basic probability matrix, because we know that these large learning models are mathematical in sense, and even language itself is mathematical in many instances, it still came to the same conclusion. And so the second thing that we did, because look, I don't trust the federal government for a lot of reasons.
Right.
I said, I'm not just going to wait for the FBI to tell me what they think happened, or the Secret Service to shut everything down, or the ATF to send secret men in gray suits. And we, by the way, go through all that in here. We decided to hire our own private investigators and our own private investigation firm that is fully licensed in the state of Pennsylvania. And they have gone through doing the shoe leather work to actually go into Butler, PA, and then down in Bethel Park, PA, where this individual, Thomas Matthew Crooks, was living, where he was working, and he was planning
Mhm,
this attack. And that's what it was,
mhm.
an attack. By the way, not just with his drone and his rangefinder and his sniper rifle, but indeed his improvised explosive devices, his IED,
Crazy.
which is always something that gets left out in this story.
And
And these
rather
were not,
sophisticated too, right?
yes, these
Yeah.
were not pipe bombs like you would see from the anarchist cookbook days in the 90s or the early 2000s, and they were not the pressure cookers that you saw at the Boston bombing and the Tsarnaev brothers. No, these were sophisticated ammo can chemical emplacement bombs, which had a remote detonator, which the FBI
Wow.
director, for as all of the nonsense he has said, even admitted that Chris Ray admitted that if he wanted to set these off, he could have. And it's my contention, and our private investigators agree with this, that it is likely that because they were a bit smaller, that what he intended to do was to blow up his own car and then use that to, potentially would have killed people. I'm sure it would have. But really, what it would have done is create a distraction. And that
Ah,
in that distraction, he would have been able to use that to potentially get away through the crowd and through the ensuing chaos, which of course went awry because number one, his bullet missed, which again, I think he didn't realize that divine providence would play
right.
a role. A gust of wind, which is always how the Holy Spirit is referred
Yeah,
to
that's right.
in the Bible, a gust.
Yeah,
And then, of course, that the stampede never took place because
right.
people did not run, people
They
did
did
not
not.
flee,
They
people
stood their
stood their
ground.
ground.
Yeah, yeah,
And President Trump has mentioned this many times how he was worried that there would be a stampede. And that's actually one of the reasons that he wanted to show people that he was okay, to prevent something like that from happening. And yet everyone was waiting to see if he was okay. And there's so many eyewitness interviews in this. And my good
yeah.
friend Bricksuit was in the front row. In fact, the angel flag that you see on the spine here was the photo from Bricksuit, and we all know Bricksuit. We love Bricksuit. But he told me and says in the book that he was so close that he was able to hear let when the agent said let's move him. He thought that meant like let's pick up his body
Oh
and move
my.
him.
Oh
And at
my.
that point, he actually thought that perhaps, because remember, there's that 1 minute where
Yeah. Oh,
you
it was
know,
a long minute. I was folling it live, almost live on X, and I
and he
yeah,
thought he meant he was close enough to hear the agents, and he thought that meant move his body. And so clearly we need answers as to what went on here.
yeah.
And more than anyone else, the Compatore family deserves
Yes.
answers
Yeah,
as to why their husband and father did not come home with them
yeah,
that day of the rally. And
yeah.
the FBI, and we detail in here to great effect their very suspicious behavior, cleaning the site. And the first time, to my knowledge,
I
that the FBI has
Yeah,
ever
the
cleaned
FBI
a site.
cleans sites now? Is that what
It's not something when crime happens. I'm from the Philadelphia area, so I'm kind of familiar with this, unfortunately. But the police don't clean up a body. They typically that's on the property owner.
Right, right.
They might you could hire in a biological cleaning service, and someone would come in and do that, but it's not a service that they perform. So this is the first time I've ever heard of that. Then, not only did they clean up the remains that were left on the AGR building, they released the body back to the family for cremation without even going through the local coroner in Butler County. And the coroner in Butler County has said that he didn't even finish up his tox screen. He didn't finish up a full autopsy. There was some preliminary work that was done, but it wasn't finished. And Congressman Clay Higgins was saying in his report that he was what actually it was in the course of his reporting that he uncovered all of this, that the FBI admitted that they didn't have the body anymore. And so the missing body of the shooter itself raises very many questions. And I think probably the biggest question of all, and President Trump has said this many times, are these foreign encrypted accounts that the FBI refuses to open. Through my sources and through our reporting in the book, we've come to learn, and as of now, I have not received any updates on this, that the FBI hasn't even attempted to open those devices or tablets since September 9th. And so, what they are focused on, though, is, and that Eric Olshan, the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania, Biden appointee, that Eric Olshan is instead, he has convened a grand jury, which was a story that I broke that I guess Politico and the Washington Post and New York Times just weren't interested in. So he's convened a grand jury, and it looks like, and I'll say looks like because I don't have definitive proof on this, but it looks like their main target, just given what we've seen, uh, seems to be the father of Thomas
Right.
Matthew Crooks.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
we've seen, of course, he's hired a pretty high profile
Yeah.
defense lawyer. That's a very good indicator of this. We know that the rifle that was used at one point was his father's, but was then transferred to the son. He bought it from his dad, basically in a legal transfer, person to person, for I think about $500. So and which is a legal sale, by the way. But at the same time, there are some questions as to whether or not the father was or had prior knowledge that this was going to be going on. Clearly, by the way, these IEDs were not ones that he had made for the first time, and
Right.
so the
Right.
design and testing of them is something that our private investigators are looking into, because through device analysis, we have uncovered numerous devices beyond, by the way, what the Heritage Foundation put out,
Mm,
that were communicating with Crooks and co-located with Crooks at his home and other places around the Bethel Park area that do not coincide with, and these are not
right.
hangout spots or
Right.
his
Right.
work or
Social
grocery
gatherings.
store.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
we're talking about going to places in the middle of the night, meeting up, and staying there for hours. And then, oh, by the way, those same devices with a pattern of. So, for example, I always tell this to people, So I'll just ask you on the spot: do you turn your phone off every day?
I do turn my I think, yeah, you just I was told I'm a boomer if I don't turn my phone off. Well, a Zoomer once looked at me and said, "Don't you turn your phone off?" So, yes, I do turn my phone off.
But do you power it all the way down?
No, I don't power it all the way down.
Right. So most people don't do that anymore. It used to be if you had a flip phone, sure, you would power it down and you'd close it and it would open up. Most people don't power it all the way down. That's why batteries have an issue now. These phones were completely powered down for
Hmm.
weeks on end. They were off the grid for weeks on end. And even in the course of business, I'm sure you'd have your phone every day.
Right.
These phones did not have that pattern, and they fit another type of pattern that we would refer to as burner phones.
Mm,
And those burner phones also continued for a time prior to the shooting, on the day of the shooting, and then even after the
wow.
shooting for a small period of time and then vanished.
Wow.
And so again, these are things that not definitive, but these are things that we are
Very
digging
very
into.
suggestive, yes, very sugge
Certainly suggest different things.
you also, uncovered some very interesting travel itinerary information with the second, would-be assassin, Ryan Wesley Routh. You wanna talk just briefly about that? That was
Sure. So
odd.
when the second shooting took place, or attempted shooting, I should say, took place, one of the first things I did upon receiving a photo of the individual, Ryan Wesley Ralph, was run his picture through a facial recognition database, which scours the internet looking for other matches of the same face. And I was really looking for social media profiles, and we did find an X profile. But something else really caught my attention very early on with this was a video that came out of Maidan Square, Ukraine,
Mhm.
which was a recruitment and a support, essentially a propaganda film for the Azov Battalion. And the Azov Battalion in Ukraine is a neo-Nazi linked, or neo-Nazi supporting, I should say,
Yeah,
ideological
yeah, yeah,
organization
from their
that
very
has been
roots, yep.
Oh, yes, that has been
Bandera.
trained
Yeah.
trained by the CIA to conduct assassinations, and anyone can read the New York Times' report on that,
Yep. That's
and
right.
see all of this out there with the 12 CIA bases that were established in Ukraine on the border with Russia prior to the current conflict. And so this guy was a Ukrainian foreign fighter who had traveled there, received some level of training. In my reporting, I've not been able to confirm that. He was a bit older. He was in his 60s. And so it said that when he went to Ukraine, they didn't want to put him on the battlefield because of his age. But it does appear that he received some basic levels of weapons training. Then he also had at times traveled to places like Istanbul, Turkey, or Taipei, Taiwan, and had even been in media, featured throughout media,
Crazy.
Newsweek and BBC and the New York Times, asking about this, or trying to promote this plan to bring Afghanistan foreign fighters. So after the fall of Kabul, so go back to the timeline.
Yep.
Kabul happens in August of 2021.
Hmm.
Ryan Wesley Ruth is still in Hawaii at this time. Then, when Maidan happened, or excuse me, when the Russian invasion happens in February of 2022, he starts getting reactivated. He travels there in May of 2022 to Kiev, which coincidentally, I was also in Ukraine in May of 2022, although I was in Lviv, which is
Yeah.
in the west. Kiev is in the
Right.
center, and then traveled down to Odessa. I don't believe I ever met him there, but we're certainly checking our files to see if we did. And I did meet with other foreign fighters that I was there and reported all this at the time. And he was attempting to bring CIA trained foreign fighters from Afghanistan into Ukraine to backfill some of the deficiencies of the Ukrainian army, which we still see on the battlefield to this day. We don't know if it's successful, but again, these are the exact types of TTPs that
Yeah.
we would expect from someone who had some kind of involvement with national security agencies. This is similar to when the true story of Benghazi, for example, wasn't that that they had a stand down order. The issue was, what was the CIA doing there in the first place? And what the
Right.
CIA was doing there
Mhm.
in the first place, and Tucker was just talking about this the other day as well. What they were doing in the first place was procuring weapons that they could send up to the rebels from Libya, and then send them to the rebels. Remember the moderate rebels in Syria, which they were then trying to
Right.
use in something called Operation Timber Sycamore to depose uh, Bashar al-Assad and this is back in
Hmm.
2020
Hmm.
or 2012. This is a program, by the way, Operation Timber Sycamore, which was launched by CIA Director John Brennan and then later curtailed by Donald J. Trump in 2017
Right.
when he went into office. One of the many, many reasons that the national security agencies are very upset with Donald Trump, because he
Yes.
always
And
is
and
shutting
you get
down their
into that a
operation.
bit in the book as well. Yeah. You
We
get
do.
into that.
We
Yeah.
it happened very close to when we were printing, and I actually had to. Well, as an author, I'm sure you are familiar with that. As interesting and fun as it is to get to make that call and say stop the presses, you also learn that it's very expensive to stop the presses,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially once you've already printed a number of
And you
copies.
and you eat
So
it too, don't you?
yeah, yeah, well, yeah, because it's pulped, and so we had to
Yeah.
pulp several thousand covers and start over
Yeah.
again. But I said that look, we all kind of agreed that it was the right move and the right thing to do to at least get one chapter in. So we
Yeah.
did get one
Yeah.
chapter on Ryan Wesley Ralph, and his photos featured prominently on the back cover. And the
And
goal, by the way, so the goal,
yeah.
just real quick, by the way, on all of this is that this is edition one of the book, and
That's what I was gonna bring
with
up.
those
Good.
private
Go for it.
investigators, they're going to be continuing their work. And my goal is that if the book does well, we'll be able to continue the investigation, release more reports. And look, with the second attempt, I'll send people down to West Palm Beach. I'll send people to Greensboro, North Carolina, not far from where I'm at right now, or out to Hawaii where this guy lived. I'll even send people to Ukraine if I have to.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the first iteration, and I think, do you have a bulletproof project that you're working on? Is that the idea?
Yes. So at some point, when although the election's been taking up a lot of my time, I spent pretty much the whole day with Elon Musk yesterday up in
Sweet.
Pittsburgh, and then
Nice.
the tailgate. It was very interesting. Yes, to be.
Are you a Steelers fan or are you a Eagles fan?
Well,
Or
yesterday
neither?
I was a Pennsylvania fan.
Yeah,
okay,
there you
a
go. I love it.
Pennsylvania
Good, good.
fan. And look,
That's a Donald Trump answer, by the way, I think.
right,
I'm a
right, yeah.
Pennsylvania
So
fan today.
look, coming from the Philadelphia area, being an Eagles fan kind of comes with the territory,
It
but
comes with the territory.
in an
Sure,
election
sure.
like this, I think it's time to unite,
Oh,
the
that's
East Side and the West Side. So I was there. I did go to the Steelers game. I did root for the Steelers. Great victory, by the way. Got to see
yeah.
them pound Aaron Rodgers' face into the pavement, and although it was
Go
incredible to
Jets
see him play
fans.
too. I mean, Rodgers just legitimately clearly belongs in the Hall of Fame. There's no question. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
no, granted, granted.
like watching lasers just
Yeah,
shoot from his
yeah.
hands when he throws that
Yes.
ball. I mean,
Yeah,
he
he's
doesn't even
stunning.
cock his arm all the way back. He just sort of flicks his fingers and the ball
Yeah.
magically
The
shoots out.
technique
It
is
was
unbelievable.
incredible to
Yep.
see. But yeah, I don't know if the Jets really really
Yeah, he's
but
got the wrong uniform. There you go.
got the wrong uniform on, and then of course Trump was supporting the Steelers. So what are you going to do? And a come from
Right.
behind win for them that day. But yeah, I was there for the Steelers. But with the Bulletproof Project, so hopefully at some point when we get more information going forward, what we're going to do is launch the Bulletproof Project, which it might be a locals page. We're actually talking to the folks over at locals about
Oh,
setting up a
yeah.
community
That's a
there
good
for this,
idea. Yeah, yeah,
so that it's a place where we're able to hang sort of look if we get various tidbits, if we get a hot fire report, or if we have you know potentially a lead and we
yeah.
want to reach out to others and say, hey, can anyone run this down, or does anyone know this person, or has anyone seen this account, or have screenshots of whatever it might be. That's actually how we got the TikTok video of Thomas Matthew Crooks walking
Wow.
down the vendors,
Right.
was just through an online community where someone finally said, hey, I was there as a vendor and I filmed this, and I was going back through my footage and just filmed a random video, and here comes Crooks walking right down the aisle,
Unbelievable.
which then of course gave me the ability to realize that, hey, wait a minute, the Turning Point USA flag was directly behind him, Turning Point Action. So I called up Noah Formica, who is the Turning Point lead representative for Pennsylvania. I said, Noah, um, go take a look at this picture of Thomas Matthew Crooks again. Did this guy come to your booth? Did your Can you
No
show
way.
this to your volunteers? And as it turns out, they did remember Thomas Matthew Crooks. And I asked them two questions. Number one, how did he act? They said very strange,
Right.
very strange. Sort of a nose up in the air. Didn't say anything, but they said he seemed arrogant, as long as he almost had some kind of secret knowledge that
Yeah.
nobody else had,
Yeah.
and wouldn't talk to them. And they were, they approached him politely and doing their jobs. Would you like to vote? Are you registered? Do you need an absentee ballot? That sort of thing. That's what Turning Point Action does. And just, he almost scoffed at them with his body language, very dismissive
Yeah.
and arrogant and
Yeah.
condescending. And then the second question, though, that I did ask, was anyone with him? And they said they didn't remember that anyone was physically with him that day, that time.
You got your Skype.
Yeah, my apologies there. I see
No, no,
my
I know
nephew
the
is
sound very well.
trying to get going there, but there's a lot to the book, and I just hope that when people get their hands on it, they can sink their teeth in. And we have some answers. We don't have all the answers, but we're working very hard to get there.
Well, it's a wonderful, wonderful iteration. Although, and what I love about it as I'm reading through this is we are in the position now to fact check the fact checkers. That's the beauty of being online, hyper connected, being in the network society. We now get to fact check the fact checkers, and that's what this book is doing. Gang, it's absolutely an amazing book. It's got timelines, it's got maps, charts, direct communications. It's got everything we know up to now about what happened on J13 and September 15th, but at a whole nother level. So just click on that link below or go to orderbulletproof.com. That's orderbulletproof.com. Get your own copy. Get copies for family and friends. They'll be blown away by this. Remember, you're also going to be helping to support this ongoing work of the Bulletproof Project, which will continue to fact check the fact checkers, bringing updated reports in what is, like Jack said, an ongoing situation. These are one of the most chilling parts of the subtitle. I had to reread it a couple of times. These are assassination attempts, plural, that continue to threaten President Trump and his family. And this book is helping to shine the light of truth in the midst of that darkness. So make sure you order your copy
And now, if I could
today.
just add,
Yeah.
we were also very honored and just very gracious that Donald Trump Jr. actually penned the
Yes.
foreword for the
Yes.
book, and
Yes.
really taped an interview with him earlier today that is going to be coming out, and just really, really honored for him to do that because to him this wasn't a political figure or a
Yeah.
cultural icon or any of those things. This was his father, it's
This
his
is
dad.
dad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unbelievable. And like you say, I mean, just the whole extended family, they're all under a threat. It's
Actually, that golf course where Ryan Russell Routh was found is the same golf course that Donald Trump Jr.'s daughter Kai, she's known for her golf. That is her course. That is where she
yeah.
goes and practices every week.
Yeah. No, this is and again, the very fact that the media blacklisted this is just I mean, if this had
Well,
happened,
that's
can
why
you
it's
imagine if
important,
this had happened to Obama for heaven's sakes? I mean,
right? That's why it's so important to get the story out, especially now going into this election.
well, Jack, seriously, on behalf of all of us here on this channel, just a huge, huge thank you. God bless you for all the work you've done and continue to do. It means so much. We can't thank you enough.
And God bless. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thank you.